Okay, colleagues, greetings and welcome back. Hopefully, we are live. Let me double check. Yeah, apparently we are. So, another day, another live stream. So, the plan for today is to talk about philosophy of education. I'm kind of torn between two different conceptions of what I'm trying to do. One is, continuing my past several live streams, is just to do a bit of oral history. That's one inclination on my part, and the other inclination is maybe to try to make this a bit more concentrated, focused, a bit more like a proper, mini lecture. Actually, taking my cue from Marx's ideas of alienation. Okay. Yes. So it's probably going to be a bit of both. I will. In my own head, the impetus for doing this is therapeutic. Again, full disclosure, we live in very uh, challenging times, much more challenging for some people than for others. I don't claim to be in a particularly challenging situation, but psychologically it's not the easiest time to be a university teacher, I guess. Again, first world problems, full disclosure. It's like genuinely, at the end of the day, I don't think I'm in a position to complain too much. But, to a large extent, this kind of a live stream is sublimation for me, sublimation. There's a lot of uneasy emotions inside my chest. And, as a bit of psychotherapy, I'm trying to talk through, you could say my own personal problems, but also situate them in the context, in the general context of, social theory, social political theory, and specifically philosophy of education. Now, I don't want to get lost in endless introductions. So let me say, I want to take my cue from Marx. If somehow you're allergic to Marx, that's okay. Marx is controversial. And even when sometimes carelessly I call myself a Marxist, I always insist that I'm skeptic first, Marxist second. So, I would identify as a skeptical philosopher, and I do find some of Marx's ideas deeply productive. So, take this with a grain of salt. This is not meant to discourage people, right? But Marx has this early unpublished text, which is known as Philosophical Economic Manuscripts of 1844, or Paris Manuscripts, and there he talks. And I don't want to focus on the text too much. In fact, I think that he gives these four. First of all, he doesn't really. It's a manuscript, so he doesn't really explain his ideas very much or very well. Much of the interpretative work is left to the reader, but he talks about these four phases of human alienation, of how under capitalism human beings are alienated from the product of their labor, from the process of laboring, that people are alienated from each other, and then there's this alienation from Gattungswesen. One way to translate this, which I like recently, is this idea that we are alienated from our common humanity, or maybe from human dignity, right? And I guess what I want to do is I want to talk about these four phases of alienation in the context of university life, of university education, and maybe a little bit in the context of the crisis that's going on right now. The crisis, well, maybe in the world, but also specifically in Russia, also specifically in Russian education. And I feel like I want to talk about 3 or 4 things at the same time, and my thoughts are rushing ahead. So let me again, like by way of maybe a bit of a preview, let me try to jump to several conclusions. So, and to phrase this in terms of why am I doing this live stream. So one is just to reflect on Marx, because I think Marx is useful and important. The other is because I think this is of a timeless significance. So this title, University in Crisis, like the previous one, Philosophy in Crisis, I did, They both sound a bit clickbaity, right? But it's true to the following extent that, I mean, right now, the university where I teach and the students I talk to, we are very much, we find ourselves in a situation of a very deep crisis. Okay, so, you know, in some sense, you could say ever since the time of Plato or of Socrates, that was kind of the whole idea, again, like in somebody like Socrates or Buddha, this philosophy is critical philosophy, right? This idea that society is always in crisis, that university, since its very inception, is in crisis, yeah? Philosophy is a crisis activity. Thinking is a critical activity that, you know, relates to crisis, yeah? So, you know, in that sense, it's not exactly clickbait, but also, I mean, you have the crisis of late capitalism, and now you have the crisis of Russian society to some extent. Again, maybe you don't care about Russian society at all, and that's fine. So I just want to use that as an illustration, because that will be familiar to some of my students, but maybe even if it's not, it's, you know, it could be useful. And again, to the extent that maybe you know, these examples will not necessarily speak to you. If nothing else, this will be oral history for future generations. At least this is probably going to be oral history for me, because, you know, I am very much in the habit of going back to these videos and live streams and just, you know, reflecting on them. And I find that deeply productive, again, as a way, you know, psychotherapy or diary, not to mention that there's this aspect of sublimation, taking a problem and then elevating it into a larger context. This Hegelian way, I guess, of approaching situations, where you take problems and turn them into productive challenges. Also, immediately, and it's like something I maybe could have begun with, but it's okay. I've, you know, a couple sentences out of the way. I also want to use this in a very short-term pragmatic fashion. There have been students who are asking me about September, and I want to address that a little bit. So right now we're at the end of the academic year. Most of the classes are due to finish by the end of April. My last class is on April 27th, I think, so very soon, in only about a couple of weeks. What's going to happen afterwards is hard to say. I probably will stay around in Moscow for at least a little bit and talk to people. Who know? I mean, future is unpredictable. I don't have any settled plans yet. But students are asking me because, you know, for a lot of people, this is a time of decision. Like, what should they do? What should they do? And let me set the context. So some people could tell me that's a possible challenge against my position. And I want to get to Marx's ideas of alienation, but I want to situate them. You see, I mean, if you just want to learn about Marx and alienation, you can open Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy and, you know, look at the abstract definitions, and they're going to be very valuable, and maybe look at Marx's own text. And I want to, you know, I want to share a different side of the story, yeah? Thinking about Marx's ideas of alienation from, if you want, like a practicing Marxist, in a time of crisis, like, you know, how can Marx's thought be useful and productive in everyday life, in some sense. So this is less, you know, Marxist scholarship and more like using Marx as a toolbox for everyday life. Yeah. So anyway, I have this anyway. Let me go back a step. So some of my older colleagues are reminding me that we as teachers have responsibility to our students to help them through difficult times and to be, you know, beacons of hope and beacons of stability in times of crisis. And to a certain extent, I completely agree with this position. Again, let's say Marx, Buddha, and Foucault are, I have declared that these are the three most important philosophers for me this year, and all three have this very important kind of therapeutic and social critical aspect. Social critical, but more importantly, therapeutic aspect to their philosophy. This isn't just, so in Buddha, in Marx, and in Foucault, it's not only about criticizing and finding problems, but also about finding solutions. So, it is not my intention to simply be, unproductively critical for the sake of criticism, destruction for the sake of destruction, destitution, carnage, for the sake of destitution. That's not the idea. The idea is to be therapeutic. Yeah, and to some extent, I feel that in general, psychological practice, psychotherapy, meditation, talking through things, again, this Hegelian way of approaching problems, very characteristically, among other, Stephen Smith, among other commentators on Hegel. Stephen Smith, wonderful professor from Yale, professor of political philosophy. Yeah, Stephen Smith, among other people, inverts Marx's dictum to explain Hegel. So, according to Marx, philosophers try to explain the world. The point is to change it. Stephen Smith, explaining Hegel, says it's exactly the other way around. The point is not to change the world, but to interpret it in such a way that we feel once again at home in the world. By the way, this is exactly what it means to overcome alienation for Hegel. Again, this German word Entfremdung, feeling that the world is alien, hostile, and external to you. Yeah, and I understand this may be a bit abstract, but still, what I'm trying to say is the following. I feel that there needs to be a balance. There needs to be a balance between therapy and reform, between therapy and maybe revolution, therapy and change. So let me maybe, I don't know, let me maybe add this somewhere. So compared to Hegel, so should we change the world? Change the world, or simply reinterpret so that it doesn't need changing. Interpret. Yeah, and kind of my preliminary conclusion is that we need both. We need both. We need both if you want kind of mental readjustment, reinterpretation, and we need both to adjust ourselves, such as the world does not need changing. So we need, if you want, therapy, but we also need, let me use the word revolution, broadly speaking. Revolution is a very tendentious word, maybe not the best word to use, but I mean like radical change. So it's like, with respect to the universe, so let me maybe erase the word revolution, let me write the word change. So therapy, which means in this case, acceptance and change is change, yeah? So it's like, to what extent do students need to accommodate themselves to the university in crisis, and to what extent should they get out of the university and move into a different university, to a different country, or just move out of the university system altogether? So this would be therapy and change. Or to what extent should the teachers absorb the problems of the educational system, and to what extent maybe they should quit the university? Yeah. So this, I understand it may be a bit difficult to follow, especially if these ideas are new to you. But compromises. If I go too slowly, I'll lose a lot of listeners. I'll also maybe lose myself, because at the end of the day, I'm interested in getting the ideas out. Maybe we'll do a second pass. I feel like I'm gonna need to do a second pass on this video to go back and revisit these ideas in at a slower pace, right? But these are the circumstances, and again, I am deliberately trying to talk about several things at the same time, and which is, I understand it's counterproductive. So let me maybe finish with these introductions, and then focus at one thing at a time. Talk about Marx, talk about the university. But again, to go back to this question that students ask me, should they come back in September? Should they come back in September? And let me again be the first person to say that these are difficult times. Nobody can know the future, and it's a complicated decision. It's a decision that each student needs to take responsibly for themselves in consultation with the people they trust, probably their parents. And for a lot of students, this is not the decision that they will make. This is a decision that their parents will make, and they very often will not have any say at all in this decision, which is unfortunate, maybe tragic, but that's the life we have, partly because the education costs a lot. And if the cost is borne by the parents, then the parents decide what the students are going to do. And that's also alienation to some extent, but that's just the reality of the situation. Now, having said all that, let me hedge my bets a little bit, and let me say the following. It's like, again, we live, right now in the spring of 2022. It's a especially critical time. time of crisis for especially educational system in Russia, especially social science education. I don't necessarily want to go into a lot of detail for various reasons. Part of them political, because I don't want to. Well, you understand. Not everything is politically correct to say out loud. Partly because we're not sure what the future holds, but it's okay. Most people understand what I'm talking about. Or hopefully understand. So let me, say, again, to hedge my bets a little bit, let me say the following. In 2008, which was a very long time ago, I have been speaking to a very distinguished, very old professor. Well, I don't want to say very old. He was not particularly old, but he was of the senior established generation, one of the most respected and one of the most senior professors of philosophy at that time in the university where I teach right now, HSC. And he told me, I was much younger back then. Well, you can do the math. And he told me, Alex, if you want to get a good education, get out of Russia. And this is an advice which an older colleague of mine gave me in 2008. And I feel that everything I've seen since then has proven this older and senior colleague right. Now, I'm not prophet from Apollo or anything like that. I do not see the situation in its entirety. I do not know your personal situation. But as a rule of thumb, I would say that in general, if you can afford somehow, in terms of, because afford financially, but also afford in terms of, your life circumstances. If you can afford to get education outside of Russia, or maybe get some kind of external online education while staying in Russia or someplace else, but get Western-style education. If you can do that, that's best, And I'm prepared to stand by that conclusion as a general rule of thumb. Now, so this is, obviously controversial question, but I am a teacher at the end of the day. I am in a position of responsibility. I feel that's a responsible advice I can give to people, and I'm prepared to stand by that advice. Now, also, immediately, I should say, I will talk about alienation in a little bit, and so I am very critical of the university system in general, and I am critical of the kind of, first world Western style university education, and I'm not saying it's perfect. And, continuing on with this, I feel that the most important education that you can get in today's world is self-education, is, the education that you give to yourself, this idea of internal grounding, intrinsic motivation, how students are motivated themselves to learn. That's the most important, the most valuable education that you can get. Learn how to learn first and foremost by yourself, be motivated by yourself, think for yourself. If you can do that, that's perfect, that's ideal, that's best, yeah? But again, if you're looking for external educational structure, again, if you can afford it, again, it's like the state of Russian social science academia is very rapidly deteriorating for reasons I don't want to go into right now, mostly obvious to everybody, but that's just the reality. To substantiate my words a little bit more, I want to say, again, I mentioned this in my previous live stream, so it's, again, so like since 2008, we have seen wave after wave after wave of exodus, and to some extent this has been going on since Soviet times, since this phrase, brain drain. So how human capital, human resources, especially people in the social sciences, flee the country, escape the country, try to escape as much as possible. This has been going on since basically 1991 or maybe even earlier. And this is well documented. I do not have a PhD in post-Soviet studies, so I'm not entitled to give you like a complete description of this process. But I do feel that it's robust enough, it's uncontroversial enough for me to just declare that, of course, there are brilliant and wonderful teachers and brilliant and wonderful intellectuals who still remain in Russia and who will remain in Russia. But there is an overwhelming pressure, and I have to tell you from my own personal experience, of the best teachers that I've had, the absolute vast majority have left. Very, very few have stayed. So it's like, when I say very few, I mean like single digits. So, and like basically, percentage, what's the mathematical term I'm looking for? Fraction, like a tiny fraction of the best teachers I've had in Russia, people I've interacted with, only a tiny fraction have stayed. Now, I don't want to insult anybody. It's like, again, I've met a lot of wonderful, inspiring teachers over the years. Most of them have left. Some of them have stayed. I'm very grateful to them. Why have they stayed? It's personal, biographical preference. Am I gonna leave? It's I'm not making any decisions at this point, partly because the future is super uncertain. But that's just the reality. That's the reality. Now, to address this question once again, to attack this question head on, but from a slightly different angle. And the question is the following: am I gonna stay in September? And I already feel kind of stupid because I did want to plan them out. I did plan to talk about Marx, and I will get to Marx, but I also want to talk about this at the same time. These two topics are very related, but I suppose I want to get this out of the way right now because this sets the context. This is why I'm thinking about Marx, and also thinking about Marx is what informs my decision. And I have, right now, as of this point, again, I've said in my previous live stream that I feel that the university right now is imploding, the university where I'm teaching. I do not have complete picture of the situation. I'm sure it's different in different departments. I'm sure it's different for different teachers. But in general, I stand by this very strong and dramatic statement that the university is imploding. So, large fraction of the students have left, especially students who are more ambitious, who are more capable, who have a stronger portfolio, like CV, have already left, yeah. And same goes, a lot of teachers have already left, and it's a strong statement, but I will make it. Most of the English-speaking, and I mostly just talk to English-speaking teachers, most of the English-speaking teachers I have talked to are not planning to return if they can help it. That's just the reality of the situation. There are all sorts of risks. There are reputational risks. There are political risks, economic risks. Risks basically too high to take to stay in September. So in general, when people ask me, am I going to come back in September? My immediate question is, will there be a place to come back to? Will this even be a question? Will there be a program to come back to? Again, officially, the 3 programs in which I taught were joint programs with the University of London. The University of London has officially cut ties with HSE, so all 3 programs are officially cancelled. They have been renamed to something else. They will probably survive. The students who have been enrolled will be, given different options. But again, formally speaking, superficially speaking, the 3 programs are, as of right now, you could say they're either dead or at least they have been put on pause. Life support, if you want. And again, officially, the ties with the University of London have been cut. So as of right now, it does not seem very much that there's going to be somewhere for me to return to in September. Now, huge elephant in the room is the administration. So when I say the administration, I mean in general staff. So generalized bureaucratic apparatus. So basically everybody, I don't want to single people out. I don't want to single any particular individual out. Yeah. So I'm talking in general about everybody who has to do with the formal side of the educational process. Yeah. And let me say the following. I think these are very difficult, very challenging times for everybody. So the first thing I want to get very clearly out of the way is I'm not trying to blame anybody. I am not trying to blame anybody. Okay. But at the same time, neither me nor any of my fellow teachers I talk to have received any clear communication from basically anybody in the administration about what the roadmap is. So this is not me trying to play the blame game or anything like that, but this is just full disclosure. It does not seem to me that the administration has a clear plan about what to do with us. Or, it's also possible that this is not very high on their priority list to talk to us. So it's a bit dramatic, a bit defensive maybe on my part. But that's the situation where we find ourselves in. It's like, again, let me say this as clearly as I can. I feel that a fraction of the students, especially disproportionate fraction of the best students, are going to leave or have already left. The disproportionate fraction of the best teachers, at least from the standpoint of formal achievements, again, because the meaning of the word best is highly subjective, but let's say citizens of Western countries with internationally recognized PhDs, which is, think what you will of that, okay? But like formally speaking, from the standpoint of CV of the resume, these teachers have either left or in the process of leaving. And again, to the extent that I know, to the extent that I talk to people, okay, people I know personally. So students are leaving, teachers are leaving, and the administration has not been very clear in terms of its communication to us what the roadmap is. So again, to the students who are asking me what to do, this is the situation on the ground. I'm not claiming to predict the future. I'm telling you what I see right now with my own eyes. Whew. Okay. That's a bit of a roller coaster, right? Let's take a pause. Let's take a step back and let's, this situation which is dramatic and emotional, and it's like, as an aspiring Buddhist, I am not necessarily very proud of myself, of the way that I am taking this situation, because at times I get excessively nervous. I wish I was more in control of myself and of my emotions, and maybe even like in terms of this live stream, I wish that this live stream was slightly more coherent. But that's the place I'm at. Okay, it's like achieving Buddhist enlightenment is a long process. We are on the way. We're on the way. Hopefully, we're not there yet. I feel like saying that, the journey is more important than a destination. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Let me kind of, again, I try to set the scene as to why Marx has suddenly become once more very important to me. Let me go back and let me talk about Marx and the four phases of alienation. Yeah. Whew. So, I'm trying to find my, because it's a bit of a different topic, but I do feel that these topics are very much related. Okay, I'm trying to think what is the best way to transition from one point to the other. So let me just start by saying the following. So I've already said that I feel that the most important aspect of education is self-education, is what the students and the teachers can do for themselves in order to, develop themselves mentally. So this is cognitive self-development. This is ideally what the university should be about. Yeah, but Marx makes, and not just Marx, somebody like Foucault as well, makes a lot of the fact. I mean, maybe this goes back to Socrates. I'm not sure. So critical philosophy will make a lot of the fact that there are declared goals, officially stated goals, and then there are the real goals. Then there's the reality of the situation. And the university is an interesting case because the university is not a factory, the university is not a farm. So in general, when we talk about alienation in the university, this may be mostly bourgeois alienation. So, bourgeois university alienation versus, let's say, working class proletarian alienation. And both of these exist, and both of these are important for Marx. And I feel that, again, the university system is a very good way to explore what Marx means by alienation and why he thinks that capitalism is, in an important respect, like the word bad is a is a simple word. It's not a technical term in Marx. Yeah, you understand. But to be overly simplistic, why capitalism is bad not just for the working class, but why capitalism is also bad for the bourgeoisie, and why not just working people, but also the bourgeoisie are alienated. Because one way or another, I have to remind myself and others that the university job, being a member of a university, is a bourgeois profession by and large. The university teachers enjoy much higher standards of living, usually higher wages, better working conditions, at least compared, let's say, to factory workers. Yeah, and especially people who find themselves in positions in elite universities or something like that. Yeah, and likewise, just because the education costs quite a lot, again, I would imagine universities are different. But especially in the universities, which at least consider themselves by their own standards, are supposed to be elite universities. In these elite universities, where the education costs quite a lot of money, yeah, which is more or less the programs I find myself in teaching. Yeah, so I am a bit of a bourgeois professor talking to bourgeois students. So when I also try to approach this from a Marxist perspective, there's this inherent tension within this analysis, because again, Marx mostly focuses on the working class, but we are not working class. Yeah. Now, Marx himself also was not working class. Yeah. So Marx was bourgeois by a formal definition, and in fact, I think in the Communist Manifesto quite clearly, he refers to himself and Engels, saying that kind of the cutting edge of the bourgeoisie, splits itself off from the bourgeoisie and joins the working class. Is this what we are doing? Well, not sure. This sounds a bit too complacent, a bit too kind of self-congratulating. But there's a bit of that going on. Anyway, these are all caveats. Let's talk about alienation. This has been a big topic for me, and I've started thinking about this for I've been thinking about this for quite a bit of time, and I probably will do a follow-up video to this, where maybe I will focus just on the idea of alienation in Marx as it pertains to the educational system. And one last methodological point before I begin is that ideas take time to sink in. Being able to repeat the words is not the same thing as understanding the words. So I have first learned about Marx's concept of alienation and these kind of four phases, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. So for like 20 years, this conceptual schema was part of my mind. Alienation, Entfremdung, alienation from human nature, which is in an important respect a way of Marx that Marx uses in negative terms to talk about his positive ideal of human nature. So when we talk about alienation, we also kind of presuppose something on the positive side. Yeah? So human beings are alien to their true nature. Describing ways in which human beings are alien to their true nature also helps us see what human nature ideally should be. Yeah? And to continue on with this, so first of all, I've known, I've known the concept of alienation. I've been familiar with this, with these four phases for, let's say, 20 years, and I don't think I've ever quite got the full picture. So this is philosophy is this kind of discipline. You return back to the same ideas. You return back to them over and over and over again. And every new time, each new time, you do a second pass, third pass, 10th pass over the same idea. There are layers of depth which are opening to you, and this is kind of a very interesting process. Also, a process which, again, in terms of the university system, like if you're doing, let's say, a test, like a multiple choice test, there's no way you can fit this kind of system, layered system into that. Philosophy, in this sense, is much less about exams. Even like an hour-long essay is not enough to explore this. I mean, this is like internal work, and you, in an important respect, the person, the individual themselves, needs to feel this in dialogues with others, I would imagine. But this is kind of a lifelong process. This isn't how, you learn something about Marx, you do a multiple choice test, and then you forget about it. And this is, again, what many universities end up doing, yeah, including our university, to some extent pushes us towards this kind of fire and forget multiple choice format. You read a text, listen to a 15-minute lecture, then you do a multiple choice. Yeah, it's not like that. These ideas need time to sink in. And again, like for me, talking about this concept of alienation is, again, talking about maybe 20 years of thinking about this and going back to this year after year after year and seeing different dimensions of this situation. And I do hope, in a limited fashion, to be a guide to that. That's the kind of the exciting part of being a teacher, learning and trying to share the learning, which helps you yourself, you the teacher, also understand. Which is why I do this live stream now, which is why I have this YouTube channel. Secondly, and this is also very important for me, it's like there was a time, quite a long period of time in my life, where I did not think that alienation was an important concept in Marx at all. And in fact, there's a whole approach within Marxism, structural Marxism, which doesn't like talking about humans or human nature or alienation. Like, these ideas are cast to the side. This is early humanistic, unscientific Marx. Let's not talk about this at all. And I have been like this. I'm sure there are my lectures on YouTube on this channel from 2 or 3 years ago, where I teach a whole lecture on Marx without mentioning the word alienation once, because I was within this frame of mind back then. And kind of, I think only this autumn, so maybe 3 or 4 months ago, maybe 5 or 6 months ago, I've realized that kind of this idea, Marx's idea of alienation, is kind of uniquely suited to explain what goes on in our classrooms. Okay, so these are methodological forewords. Let's wrap up with them. Let's talk about alienation itself. Yeah, and this does have some relation. Maria, low chance, but some chance, non-zero chance that Maria will actually be listening to this live stream at some point. Her presentation on David Graeber's bullshit jobs. It's a technical term from Graeber. And this was a presentation that really struck a chord with me, because as she was doing the presentation, I saw kind of how much of our job within the university is, again, what Graeber technically calls bullshit jobs, right? So something that we do kind of like as an imitation, which ultimately, honestly, is just complete waste of time, but I'm just trying to see what kind of a microphone. I hope that my mic is still working. So something that is honestly simply a waste of time, but we are under some kind of an illusion that no, we're doing something useful. Yeah, and Graeber, I don't think he uses the word alienation, but I do feel that he, I do feel that he has something very similar in mind when he talks about that. I'm just double checking that the sound is working. Okay, that's bad. Yeah. So so let's start again. So when we talk about this alienation, it refers, I feel, both to teachers and to students, and that's kind of the tragedy, because I feel kind of ideally, teachers and students should be in this together, but very often they're not. So let me start. Well, I don't want to say start, but let me try to run through this briefly, and maybe to give you a feel for what this is. So alienation from product of labor, right? The idea is that I mean, what is the teacher's product of labor? Teacher does a class, maybe a lecture or a seminar on some topic, right? But the idea is that we don't choose the topic, and we don't necessarily care about the topic, and we kind of the product, which is a lecture or a seminar, is in an important respect kind of not controlled by us, but is controlled by the university. Like, we don't do it for the sake of ourselves, but we do it for the sake of the university. So imagine a lecturer doing a lecture, or let's say a student doing a presentation. So I'm talking about both teachers and students now, right? And so immediately you can see how Marx talks in the negative. He says that we are alien to our human nature. And this immediately offers us an opportunity to see some kind of a normative ideal in Marx of what true expression of human potential, for individuality is. Yeah. So there is a positive normative ideal embedded in Marx, and this positive normative, like strong, positive normative ideal. That sounds strange, but you understand, kind of a normative ideal of what a human being could be, right? And I think in Marx goes back to the ancient Greeks, especially to Aristotle. This notion of creativity, developing our rich and varied abilities, developing them together with others, expressing our creativity. So let me try. Yes. So creativity, so rich and varied creativity together with others. Yeah. And notice that togetherness is a very important part of, and again, so this, to really oversimplify, goes back to Aristotle. Marx harks back to Aristotle. In order to become an excellent painter, you need to be a member of a school of painters together with others, right? So you need teachers, but to become excellent at your craft. But also, like, if you're a painter or a movie maker, you also want other people to see what you have made, to see what you have done, right? And ideally, like, if you imagine painters or philosophers or writers, think of Karl Marx himself, or think of somebody like Franz Kafka, right? So let's say Kafka writes a book. Presumably Kafka wants everybody to read this book, or would be happy, or has this intention that the whole world see his novel, yeah? And so like this aspect of togetherness, you want others to appreciate your work and to maybe be inspired by your work or uplifted by your work. And then you also rely on other people. So before Kafka can become a brilliant writer, he reads other writers who teach him how to write, directly or indirectly. Yeah. And so when we talk about this alienation from productive labor, now compare this to kind of you as a teacher being forced to do something which you don't care about. You are forced to give a lecture on the topic you do not care about. As a student, you're forced to make a presentation on something that you don't care about at all, right? And there's this immediately, this very kind of nefarious maybe is not the right word, but it's like exploitative and coercive element in education, right? So, and it's kind of interesting because in the educational system, there is this capitalist mode of exploitation, in a sense that teachers need to be paid, or staff needs to get paid, but let's focus on the teachers. It's like, we're slaves to wage, but we're also slaves to this like quasi-feudal system of privileges. So, So wage slavery plus this, quasi-feudal, how should I put this? Like, it's like a corvée system, in the sense that, like, well, let's use the word privilege. Privilege and service. Privilege and service. Service that you do not because you're going to get paid, but because you are fulfilling some kind of a requirement. You understand? So it's like, again, if you want to get a degree, like a master's degree, Maybe as a part of your master's degree, you're expected to do some teaching. Or maybe you're getting a PhD, and on the way to your PhD, you're expected to do some teaching. And this is different in different countries and different university systems, but especially in Russia. And so in Russia today, this is true. So what I'm trying to say is that so much of teacher work and student work is not motivated by wage slavery and this kind of coercion that you're gonna go hungry if you don't fulfill your obligation, but is motivated by this system of kind of non-monetary status rewards. Like you are expected to do something. This is a requirement, yeah. And it's like, in terms of students, this is in terms of the grade, and in terms of teachers, this is in terms of, I don't know, some kind of qualification requirement or something like that. Like you are supposed to do it that way. Like this is protocol. This is not exchange for money, but this is you are fulfilling a requirement. And this is a very quasi-feudal system. It honestly feels like serf labor. So you have wage slavery, and basically, maybe let me even add the word serf. Right? So when people, like, again, imagine you have a teacher who, let's say a young junior teacher in the department, and they're also getting their PhD, and if they don't do their teaching, they also maybe get paid, but if they don't do their teaching job very well, then they'll get in trouble and they will not get their PhD. You understand, right? So let's, again, imagine like you are a seminar teacher for a lecturer, and your lecturer is also your thesis advisor, and if you don't do a good job teaching, sometimes for pay, sometimes for low pay, sometimes for free, if you don't do a good job, maybe then you will not get a PhD, because there are ways, again, the educational system, especially in Russia, is not very transparent, is not very competitive, and kind of in this sense, it's not capitalist, it's feudal. You see, it's not capitalist, it's feudal, and it lacks transparency and competition. So, so let's say not capitalist, but like anti-capitalist. So like pre-capitalist, yeah, pre-capitalist. Pre-capitalist. It kind of is like non-transparent, unaccountable, and basically you have this like patrimonialism. How again you have this like system of quid pro quo, and like if again, yes, you have a formal contract, but then there are expectations over and above this contract, and if you don't fulfill those expectations, you could be punished, within the system by this untransparent, non-accountable, patrimonial side of the equation. How, again, your thesis advisor or somebody like that will make trouble for you because the system is kind of lacks competition and accountability. So non-transparent, unaccountable, patrimonial, and non-competitive. Very importantly, non-competitive. Again, this general idea that kind of teachers are, and students, this is true for both teachers and students, they're tied to the department, they're tied to the program in which they're teaching, because there's just no opportunity to switch. So again, you're a teacher in this particular department, this is where you have to teach. If you're going to quit, who else is going to accept you? It's like, again, I would imagine kind of, especially in the West, in the first world West, in the kind of vibrant, globalized university educational system, you freely move from one place to another. There are different departments, and you have different options. You don't like it here, you can go someplace else. Probably, usually, you can find some kind of a better arrangement. This is very obviously, well, I don't want to say very obvious, but this is much less true of Russia. This is much less true of Russia, where there's much less social mobility. Social mobility is much more limited, yeah, and kind of the way that in general kind of educational economics works, the economy of education works, is usually kind of if you found a place and you're going to quit, you will be offered a much worse position. Again, is this true across the board? I'm not sure. I haven't done a sociological study, so like don't take my words with a grain of salt. And to at the end of the day, you could say this is just oral history. even if I'm wrong, this is a common prejudice among teachers in Russia, that much of the work that teachers do is kind of motivated by these kinds of considerations. So many people I have talked about in different universities, in different departments, is the idea that they're teaching in this particular position, and that's the only position where they can teach. If they're going to quit from this position, they might as well quit from the university. They might as well quit being a teacher and go just retire if they can afford it, or go enroll into some kind of a business, because there's basically no alternative if you want to do this, full time and get paid and whatever. Just because the system is so uncompetitive, untransparent, and to a large extent patrimonial. Again, and when I talk about this is talk about alienation. I would imagine this is also true, like worldwide, but to a lesser extent. Russia, in this sense, is isolated. And to go back to this kind of situation, to maybe comment a little bit on the crisis that goes on right now, that's the problem, that Russian university is in the process of getting isolated from the rest of the world, especially from the English-speaking world. So if academic mobility is going to decrease, if foreign teachers are going to quit, and Russian teachers are going to get fewer opportunities for mobility within Russia or outside of Russia, this is going to decrease the quality of education much more, and this is going to increase the level of alienation in the system as a whole. So this is why I keep talking about how, what is happening right now, this great crisis and honestly calamity, the economy might recover, geopolitics might recover, but I feel, and even math and physics maybe will recover, but the social sciences, I feel, just will never recover from this blow. In fact, again, I gave you the story once again. In 2008, a senior teacher in Russia told me, Alex, if you want a good education, get out. And his words have been getting more and more true by the year. And again, I have seen so many of my colleagues leave, partly because I feel that what I'm saying right now, it's not politically correct to say, I would imagine, although I'm not sure if it's much of a secret. Maybe it's an open secret. Maybe everybody understands this, right? And in some sense, I'm not sure, am I kind of letting people in on the secret? Maybe this is not politically correct. Maybe I should not be saying these words. But at the same time, I feel, to a very large extent, this is common knowledge. And even if kind of sociologically, quantitatively, it's not exactly true what I'm saying to you right now, it is still true, at least in terms of oral history, or true in the sense of accurate. This is my best attempt at relaying the general attitudes that I hear among the teachers I talk to in Russia. So this is kind of from my limited perspective, my best attempt at oral history. Anyway, so we have this alienation from productive labor, and this is maybe the biggest part. Yeah, and by the way, so also it's one thing to do a lecture in class. And some students show up, some students don't, and you do this kind of for the benefit of the university on university's terms. It's very different what I am doing right now. Like right now, I have decided that I want to talk about this particular topic. I woke up this morning and I thought, Marx is what's on my mind. This is what I want to talk about. And the reason I'm doing this is not for the sake of the algorithm or because I want to get views or whatever. No. I just want to talk, and I'm using YouTube as a platform that at this moment in time, I think best allows me to speak to basically everybody I know and everybody who cares about me and who cares to listen to these long form ramblings from me. So it's like, is this like so? What is the opposite of alienation? I don't know. Freedom. This is alienated labor, and then there's free labor. Yeah. Is this completely free? Well, I don't want to say it's completely free, but like in general, what I'm doing right now, the product, quote unquote, which I'm producing right now, this mini lecture or something like a live stream on Marx, is much less alienated compared to, let's say, many lectures I've given in the university for the benefit of the university, kind of according to the demands of the university. Yeah, it's kind of, this is a much freer format, and so kind of by analyzing alienation, immediately we can think of ideas of how can we get beyond the university system, right? And also presumably, again, you are listening to this because you find it worthwhile or useful, hopefully to some extent. Again, this is not my best performance. This is very much a work in progress. I hope to do a second pass. I am very happy if you, my dear listener, find this useful. Yeah, that's the point. But what I'm driving at is that this is a free enterprise for me. It's a free choice for me. It's also a free choice from you for you. Probably, hopefully. Like if you find this boring, you can press pause button or just close the application at any moment. It's very different from, again, being within the university system where, and this comes back, I would imagine, to the second point, this kind of alienation from process of labor, that like we have a schedule, you have to be on time, on schedule, this particular time, this particular place. You cannot press pause, like if you're not feeling well, it's usually very hard, practically impossible to reschedule, yeah? And there's this kind of the syllabus, the curriculum, you have to follow the curriculum. If right now we're supposed to do, I don't know, Clausewitz or Carl Schmitt or what have you, like today we're supposed to do Clausewitz and not Marx, it doesn't matter. If the teacher feels like talking about Marx, it doesn't matter. If the students feel like talking about Marx, no, we have to be doing something else, yeah? So, and this is kind of also this idea of alienation from process of labor. And again, the question for Marx, to some extent, is kind of why? I guess, well, gets into all sorts of problems about, in general, how the labor system should be organized in society as a whole. That's a whole separate question. I don't want to oversimplify, and it's kind of definitely a topic for another day. But definitely within the university, it feels like so much of what we're doing is for show, and the rules exist there not because the rules help us learn, but because the rules simply create an illusion that we are doing work, whereas in fact we're not doing any work. We're just, we're just ticking boxes. We're just ticking boxes. I'm sure there must be a synonym to this. Yeah. So we're imitating. We're creating an illusion of doing something, deeply productive. Even though some of my best seminars, for example, throughout the years of teaching, have been seminars which did not go did not go according to plan. Seminars which, from the standpoint of the curriculum, just completely went off the rails. But there was a deeply important topic that we had to discuss, and it was actually good. It was good for students' self-development. Yeah, and this kind of gets into. I'm sorry, I don't want to talk about everything at the same time, but this is a very important caveat, right? So when we talk about freedom and creativity, for Marx, there's a very important notion of ideology. That the university, our society has ideology, but the university system also has an ideology. And the ideology is that we are, in the university, developing our rich and varied abilities. That the university is for the benefit of the students who are going to learn and develop and grow as people. And it's also for the benefit of the teachers, because they love teaching and they get enabled by the university system. Again, this Hegelian ideal of positive freedom. Yeah. Whereas in fact, so many teachers are alienated and do this only because they're afraid to quit or can't afford to quit in terms of money. And so many students are forced to study because their parents make them, or because they're afraid that they'll be out of job, etc., etc. So, even though the ideology of the university, that it's about freedom and creativity and self-development, let me maybe write this, kind of the ideology of the university is about freedom, creativity, and self-development. Whereas in fact, so yes, so rich and very creativity together with others, whereas in fact it's about wage slavery, quasi-feudal privileges, and basically forced labor, basically, force and coercion, let me just write the word coercion. So you have this ideology of freedom, but reality, which this ideology masks the reality of coercion. So, okay, product, process. So I have to confess, I am running out of steam a little bit, and this is a whole separate topic. This could be a whole separate just lecture or live stream talking about this alienation of people from each other. How I already mentioned this. Like if you imagine like a brilliant writer or a brilliant painter, like everybody is your friend. Everybody is your friend, right? You have teachers whom you learn from, and you have students or viewers or readers whom you would like to be inspired by your work. Everybody is your friend. So ideally, if you're a good university teacher, like your colleagues help you be a better teacher. Your students, you engage with, you're fulfilled by your job. We are supposed to be friends to each other. Whereas in fact, the university system makes us feel like competitors. So like, let's say, if this teacher gets fired, maybe I'll get their teaching position or something like that. And that's a horrible kind of neoliberal oppressive individuality. Neoliberal oppressive kind of belligerent individuality. War of all against all. War of all against all. War of students against students. War of teachers against teachers. So students versus teachers. Versus teachers. Let me just versus teachers. Yeah. So everybody against everybody. You could add the administration here, I guess, as well. So especially how, again, students are fighting for the ratings, and you understand this kind of competition in terms of like GPAs and scores and who's a better student, like competition for grants, etc., etc. Whereas in fact we are supposed to all be friends, ideally. And alienation from common humanity or from human dignity, that's always the biggest, most problematic claim that Marx makes. I mean, I think it's true. I agree with it 100%, but it takes, I think, a lot of time and effort to explain what he means by this. But again, this ultimate idea of how human beings flourish together with others. Again, how we have these rich and varied abilities which we express together with others, express and develop together with others. That's what this term Gattungswesen, I think, means at the end of the day. And yeah. I have run out of steam a little bit. So again, I'm not sure. It's like, I do feel that these are important thoughts, and I do feel that kind of this concept that I saw in Marx of alienation is uniquely suitable to university life, and I did not really understand it very much in the past. But kind of, it's like, as time goes by, I see it as more and more applicable, more and more illuminating of what goes on. Now, let me say just a word about how I think this could be very different. Now, this could be very different if you make learning free as a part of the community, right? So, I mean, there's some people, some regulars already here on YouTube who show up from time to time. Imagine we were in the same place physically, in the same city or town geographically, or we could do this online, and we would just meet, I don't know, every week or something. If there's a time slot which is convenient for everybody, and we could just, like a worker democracy, we could just decide on what we want to study, and we could pursue this together, right? And in an important sense, kind of, the internet enables this very much, kind of this intrinsic motivation, internal grounding, kind of learning because you want to learn, and talking to people because you want to talk to people. And very obviously, kind of, I mean, and the shortcut, the thing that allows this kind of true expression of freedom is if you're not forced to do this. Like, if people talk about universal basic income, as a Marxist, I don't like the idea of universal basic income. I like the idea of universal basic needs. Marx says, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. Yeah? Universal basic needs. So if we all are not afraid to, starve, or if we're not afraid to get bankrupted by hospital bills or something like that. Yeah, like we could afford to have this space of freedom to engage in intellectual exchange. Yeah. So again, these issues are systemic and they are kind of societal issues, issues which deal with problems which should be solved on the level of society, or maybe on the level of societies, global international community. So these are not simple issues, and they do not have simple, straightforward solutions. So I'm not explaining how to fix the system. I'm just having a certain pointer in that direction, right? Well, I mean, also, since I'm doing pointers in directions of solutions, you know, let's remember how philosophy originated. Again, in Plato, in Plato's dialogues, again, this phrase schole, where we get the word school. Schole means leisure, something that free people do in their spare time. People who can afford leisure time engage in these dialogues. Yeah, and you can think of Socrates. You know, one example would be Plato's Republic, where you have a whole bunch of people who are independently wealthy, who don't have to work, who don't have to be places, and they can just afford to spend an evening just talking about, you know, general questions such as what is justice. Yeah, philosophy is a bit of a luxury. Yeah, and I'm not sure if I should mention this now or not, but I do feel that there's an important link from Plato to Marx, right? So Marxist elements of Plato, Platonic elements of Marx. Yeah, so it's like, again, this Platonic ideal of society run by philosopher kings and queens, and I feel kind of the easiest way to understand what Marx means by by communism, is society, which is kind of true worker democracies, society run by philosopher kings and queens. Now, I keep also talking about this idea of labor and idea of work, yeah, and maybe I should talk about this at least one word. So it's like, I feel kind of the word creativity is maybe kind of, you know, this rich and varied creativity together with others. Maybe this is more important, or this is clearer than work or labor. I do feel that this is ultimately what Marx means when he talks about labor, creativity. It's just, you know, words don't have a fixed meaning once and for all, and I feel that this is actually what Marx means. And when he talks again about labor or work, yeah, this again somewhere Proudhon, I think, this idea of travail attractif, you know, attractive labor, creative labor that actually fulfills you, yeah, and quasi-Aristotelian ideal, yeah, and maybe I could mention this notion of like, what do you want to do with life? And again, there is no simple, straightforward question of what should people do with life, with themselves. What is the meaning of life? The ultimate question of philosophy. But again, this notion, like, think of somebody. One person is maybe this is TMI, maybe I shouldn't say this, but whatever. It's like one person that inspires me is not, he doesn't think of himself as the greatest intellectual of our times, and I'm not making this claim either, but a person who is deeply inspiring to me is Ross Scott, and he talks about how he has this passion, he wants to make a movie, and he is in the process of making it. It's just that it's difficult to make movies without, you know, going into debt, without selling yourself out to major corporations, but that's what he's doing, right? But I think you can immediately get a feel for what Marx talks about in terms of labor or creativity or you know, work, when it's like, what are you doing with your life, Ross? And he would say, the project of my life is to make this movie, the movie. This is my passion. What I'm going to do after that, I'm not sure, but like for the next 5 or 10 years, this is going to be the thing I'm working on. I want to have the best script possible, the best, you know, direction possible, you know, find the best actors who are going to do this with me. By the way, this is completely non-commercial. It's going to be distributed for free. As many people try to reach as wide an audience as possible, etc., etc. But you can see, like, I think it intrinsically makes sense. The kind of life's project, making a movie, or like Nietzsche would say, his life's project is like writing a book, this particular book. And I feel I'm reminded, Nietzsche, I think, has this phrase that once he finishes writing a particular book, he faces this kind of abyss of purposelessness and meaninglessness. Oh no, I finished writing a book, like my life has no meaning, and he has to start working on the next book. And that's what keeps him going, right? But this kind of, when people talk about how under communism, individuals will want to labor, this sounds stupid and outrageous to a lot of people. And I want to say the reason it sounds stupid and outrageous is because it's framed in wrong language. Like that's kind of, labor can be horrible. Work is hell, especially capitalist work is hell. But there is a different side to human creativity, which can be different, again, in terms of writing books, paintings, but also engineering and, creating machinery and, it's like so many engineering inventions were made by, and scientific discoveries were made by people who were not motivated by profit, but who had this intrinsic motivation in work. And this is ultimately what makes our society tick, because our society right now is based on science and technology. And I want to make a strong claim that the major breakthroughs in both science and technology were not motivated by profit. Or at least they need not have to have been motivated by profit. And many of them quite patently were not. Again, so many of inventors and scientists are completely not motivated by profit motives, but again have this intrinsic motivation in labor. How exactly does that work? Some students are going to ask me, what is the evolutionary psychological explanation of that? And that's a separate discussion. Maybe just make an asterisk. Could talk about this at some other time. Okay, so a whole bunch of other things I want to talk about. Yeah, so community, one thing that, I'm sorry, this is kind of just me picking up the pieces of the things I also wanted to mention just randomly, like as endnotes or footnotes. There's this big problem that we sorely lack community of students and teachers, community within teachers, community between teachers and students. I would imagine this should include ideally administration and parents as well, partly because parents are part of this whole arrangement, at least right now. And this is very sorely lacking. And I want to say this isn't just a problem with the way our particular university works, but this is a problem with neoliberal way of organizing society. Kind of this repressive individuality, repressive anti-individual individuality, where individuals are like produced in this Foucauldian fashion in a individual carceral cells. Divide and conquer, basically, neoliberal divide and conquer. Yeah, so I wanted also to mention this goal displacement, and maybe this is something I should talk about. So goal displacement of this iron law of oligarchy or whatever, right? So this idea that initially the purpose of university education is to develop our rich and varied abilities, but I think it's very telling. It's very telling that if you look at the way the university functions, it seems that to a very large extent, again, what I'm going to say right now is going to be super controversial. Maybe a lot of people will find it offensive. So let me. I'm not trying to offend people. This is just, again, in terms of oral history, my observation. Again, since the situation has begun to unravel in late February, early March, and there's been a lot of turmoil in academia, especially in social sciences, especially cutting ties between Russian academia and the rest of the world, especially first English-speaking First World West. Yeah, there has been minimal, almost zero communication from the administration to us, the teachers, and I feel that's a very clear way to show this notion of goal displacement. Like this is for the administration. It seems, it appears, maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like what we are doing is a completely business venture. Like nobody really cares about the quality of the education. Nobody cares about the psychological state of the teachers. Nobody wants to help us. Nobody wants to, try to somehow maintain and build on what's going on right now. Like maintain and build on the good things that we still have left. It seems that the only question on everybody's mind is if the university system takes a hit, reputational hit, or like in general, like teachers will leave, the prestige of the universities will fall, the prestige of Russia will fall. The question is, how is the university going to earn money in September. Are the students going to come back, and are the students going to pay, right? And to a very large extent, I feel that the administration is not interested in talking to teachers because they assume in this quasi-feudal patrimonial fashion that the teachers are these kind of like, in general, within the capitalist pecking order, to be a university teacher is to be a loser in contemporary society, at least for the vast majority of teachers, especially who are maybe adjuncts or junior members of faculty. These are not very prestigious or highly paid jobs. Most good teachers I know are not motivated by money. They're motivated, they have this intrinsic motivation because they love learning and they love sharing their learning. I mean, right now I'm talking to you. I don't get paid for this, yeah? And I don't expect to be paid for this. Is this good for my CV? Probably not. It's like, I hope, I think, I feel it's good for my soul, but probably not for my CV. Okay, this is a psychological practice, yeah? But sort of within the pecking order of society, within this kind of general narrative, I feel kind of to be a university teacher is to be a deadbeat, is to be a loser, is to be somebody who has no options, somebody who has very kind of very low kind of marketable skills. And so to a large extent, I feel I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I do get this a bit of an impression from the way the administration talks to us sometimes is that first of all, we're completely expendable, that any teacher can be replaced with somebody else because there's always like a ton of unemployed graduates, like recently graduating students. And anytime you fire any teacher, it's okay. You'll immediately hire just a last year's graduate, and maybe even the university will save some money, and the quality nobody cares about, partly because there's very little competition, right, in the educational system. And so on the one hand, we're expendable, so if you want to quit, feel free. And secondly, there's also this expectation on the part of the administration, I feel sometimes, that we're not going to quit because we're serfs. Because we're serfs, we're tied to the land, so to speak, and we're not at liberty to quit. And we don't have any alternative options. And it's like, you could say, wow, Alex, slow down. This sounds very, very hostile and very combative. Why do you say such mean things? And again, to some extent, this is oral history, because again, this is the feeling I get from speaking to a lot of teachers, on the one hand, and I stand by that. The kind of phenomenological truth of that statement from the standpoint of teacher self-understanding, at least from the teachers I talk to, from the limited perspective that I have. But secondly, yeah, I do have to say that, again, in these times of crisis, some of the very little communication, very little snippets of communication that we have received from the administration, again, the university is huge. I'm not blaming particular people, and different people may be in different circumstances, but the snippets that we got, some of them appear to be very hostile to us. Like, basically the notion being that the university is in deep like economic financial trouble, and kind of our problems, it's like, it's like we are expendable labor. And like, if we don't like something, if we don't agree with the university policy, there's the door. There's the door. At least, not necessarily in terms of the letter of the law, the letter of communication, but in terms of the spirit of communication. So in this kind of, to a large extent, this whole live stream has been motivated. Again, there was a particular student, Sophia, who asked me, am I planning to stay in September? And this is my long-winded way of answering Sophia. I mean, the shortest and the clearest answer is, I don't know. It's very hard to say. There's too much uncertainty. But a longer answer, the longest possible answer is this whole live stream. But the longer answer, kind of intermediate answer, is that I'm not sure that there will be a program or a university or a department to come back to in September. In name, officially. Of course, the kind of the educational process will continue in name, officially, superficially, everything remains the same. But at the same time, I feel in terms of the students, the administration, and the teachers, it's going to be very different. Different people are going to be, like the different students, in the sense that some students will leave, some students will decide to not enroll or not to enroll into our programs. Teachers will leave or will change their attitude. And I also feel that maybe the administration will change or will change its attitude. So I mean, I'm not I'm not necessarily privy to the kind of internal goings-on in the university. I try to stay out of university politics. I'm not interested in that at all. It's like, again, I'm the person who likes reading, I don't know, who's inspired by Plato, Machiavelli, Marx. That's my thing. I absolutely hate kind of internal university politics. Again, there's all this pecking order and whatnot. So, it's like, it's not that I'm knowledgeable, but there were people talk about these tectonic changes, about how the leadership of the university is changing, particular deans or whatever. It's like some key people in the university have been changed in the past years and will probably change in the nearest future. I'm not versed in that. I'm not knowledgeable enough to comment on any of that. So that's the long and the short of it. This has been going on for quite some time. I feel I've talked about a lot of things. Should I talk about Weber, instrumental rationality? That was about this goal displacement. Again, the goal of the university is to, developing rich and varied abilities, but instead of that, we get this latent function that university is this business institution earning money. And this is how you have this, in Weber, you have this value rational action and instrumentally rational action. So value rational action is like, I want to learn for the sake of learning. How do I do this in the most efficient, most satisfying, most fulfilling way possible? Like, what are the best textbooks to read? That's value rationality. And instrumental rationality is how do we earn as much money as we can as a university? And you have this kind of goal, Weberian goal displacement. Again, this in terms of manifest and latent function. Yeah. Tragic topics to a large extent, I feel. I have to confess. But sometimes we have to talk about things which are sad. That's life. Okay, something's wrong with my formatting. Okay, I think I'm gonna leave it like that. Let's see what goes on in the live stream. So Natig is asking about the PEP master's program in HSC. No, Natig, I'm very sorry. I feel like I'm absolutely in no position to comment. First of all, I think it's the first time I hear about it. Politics, economics, philosophy. Wow, that's very interesting. Is it in Russian? In English? Wow. You see, Natig, this is how mal-informed I am. HSC is a huge university. It's the first time I hear about this program. You know what? I'll make a note. I'll come back to it, and I'll look at it later. Honestly, absolutely cannot comment. But Natig, thank you very much for asking. I'll check it out. Okay, some people saying hi. Elizabeth saying konnichiwa, Elizabeth. Brian says, good morning. Varya is here as always. Alienation is very apropos. Unfortunately, yes, in times like these. Natig, once again, greetings and thank you so much for the PEP heads up. So, an old-timer for the channel, I still cannot pronounce your name, so it's Kartoffelmanden, I think. Hello to you as well. Steven says, greetings, Steven. Yes, best of health to you as well. Nikolai says, just passing by. But it's nice to see you. I think we're going to wrap it up here. Was this useful? I have no idea. Again, if nothing else, this is oral history, people. This is oral history. I'm going to come back to, I think, unless I, if I don't die. Sorry, I don't want to get gloomy. I feel that this is going to be, it's like if I'm going to be doing something productive with my intellectual life, this will be a very important point in my life to think about and go back to. Nikolai, wonderful, our wonderful part of our community, our wonderful physicist from Vienna, talks about how interesting times make for good philosophy. Let's hope that we can accept the challenge of the times and make good use of it. Achieve deeper levels of enlightenment and clarity of thought. Be stimulated by what goes on. Anyway, colleagues, thank you so much for showing up. And I hope this was illuminating, maybe, or stimulating. And until next time, stay safe and take care.